a fantastic trio from Psyon Games. We have what I call the Three Musketeers, who have been working with Green Elephant for many years, who have become friends and also colleagues in work. And we're actually tonight going to be streaming about some behind the scenes topics of how it is to be using chaotic roles in work. Now, what is chaotic roles? I'll cover that in a second. But before we jump into the actual topic of the day, which is going to be a Viking check-in, be nice maybe to just hear you all three introduce each other. Perhaps Nico, you could go first.
Yes. So I'm introducing Olli this time. So Olli is company CEO. He's pushing with the vision. Super inspiring person. I mean, he always finds the bright side of life, even like in a really tricky situations, and like really well supports the team as needed. And Olli is, I think, one of the most open-minded people that I have ever met, and it's been like really big learnings for me as well. And also Olli has really good book tips how to develop yourself as an ultimate people or person, and it's like inspiring at work, but also like in free time. So like pushing to the limits and like finding about like what is like the ultimate you. And of course, Olli brings the money to company, so that's, I think, valuable person, and also always finding learnings in every situation. So if we fail at something, there's also like learning, and we find that, and we develop ourselves and the company.
Awesome.
Then
thanks.
Then Valtteri.
Yes, I will gladly introduce you tonight, Nico. So yeah, where to start? Basically, if there are two types of people in the world, those who wander around and those who do, Nico is a person who does. So ever since joining us in 2019, was it? So it's been 3 years at least. Nico just kind of brought a huge rush of energy into the team with really clear ways to execute things, to make things happen, to get things done. That was definitely something that changed in our culture back then, getting things done more efficiently, more structured. And I definitely think this is Nico's superpower. There is nothing basically that you cannot toss him his way and he wouldn't find an answer to it or a way to execute it. So really reliable team member, and always helping out and always looking for new ways to help. So exactly the kind of person that you want to work with. And I don't mean to sound old or say that we are old only, but there's definitely like a rush of young blood in Nico when we talk about the impact that each of us has on the team. But yeah, that would be Nico in a nutshell for me. What about you?
All right, so I will be introducing Wanda, and so I think that everyone can say that there are like some people who have affected their life in a big way, and I have to say that Wanda has been one that has been affecting my life in a very, very big way. And we actually met almost 10 years ago, and we met in this kind of language course for university science students. And our relationship started actually with the conflict in views, even though we didn't know each other. So the reason was that Wanda was able to kind of publicly express her opinion about something in a very bold way, and then obviously I challenged that view, and then we kind of became friends. We started to discuss and we became friends. And then 3 years after that, I knocked on Wanda's door and asked her to join Psyon. And the reason was that I knew that she had no experience on game, but I also knew her values and abilities to think. And I think what I have learned is that always look for kind of like values, abilities, and after that you look for skills. And I thought that okay, she will learn the skills because she can. She has the abilities to think, and she has the same of values where we were going with Psyon. So that was kind of like a beginning of our relationship. And I think that one superpower is empathy, boldness, and logical thinking.
Thank you, all of you. Now, this was a hard challenge. I put you on the spot. For those of you watching, by the way, I didn't give them any time to prepare this. They had to sort of improvise how to introduce each other, which is something that often people don't do. When you go to a company, meetings often start like this: "Hi, I'm Estev, and I'm from this country, and this is my job and my responsibility," which gets very sort of like, predictable. But here, actually, what thing about team dynamics with such you've been working now for, I can't remember how long has it been that we've been working, maybe 5 years, 6 years, maybe even longer than that. But there's been a lot of growth in the team, and the growth in the team has brought its share of stress, like every single startup, but it's also brought a lot of trust building. There's been moments where I've actually been in the first hand experiencing really interesting, internal conflicts, actually, which I can share because you've given me permission to talk about some of them. We can open those up later, but the transforming conflicts is something that you have actually learned to do. And most people in Finland, at least in my experience, are tending to avoid conflicts, thinking that all conflicts are bad and destructive. And actually what you've managed to do, which is something I often share with other people, which is why I invited you on the stream as well, is that you've managed to go beyond that first level knee-jerk reaction to conflicts, which is conflicts are bad, let's try and avoid them. And you are able to tackle them head on and transform them into trust, which is why you're able to still work together, smile and look at each other's imperfections and still manage to get along like you do now, and be able to have a sort of improvised streaming session with this random Viking wearing this weird fleece. So thank you for joining, and thank you for being the awesome trio that you have been so far. There's been a lot of things that we've done together. One of them you might remember was when we went to that offsite in the beautiful location near Jyväskylä, and we had done a lot of scanning of your behavioral data as a team. I might use some of that data today if we need to on the round 2 of the Viking check-in, but I'm not going to go too deeply into data today. The point is more just to have a casual dialogue conversation with you about what's been going on as a team with chaotic roles, which is a big unknown for many startups who would benefit from understanding what a chaotic role is. So we're going to open this up in 3 rounds of what we call the Viking check-in, which is why I'm wearing this. Boast is just to build confidence. We often talk about, I'm good at this, I'm good at that. So this is an opportunity to boast something to do with the chaotic roles. The challenge is where we might open up individually, optionally, one of you, all of you, a particular challenge that you're facing around internal organization of roles, or even just chaos. And the toast is a closing round where we sort of toast something, an idea, person, or something that you feel like toasting that we can all toast together before we close the session. So what is chaotic? Chaotic is nothing to do with chaos theory. If you haven't ever heard of it, I'd encourage you to check out. This is a YouTube video. I did a hand doodle a few years ago explaining the theory about it. It's very, very useful for anybody working in small teams, remote teams, startups, and even corporate setups who are trying to be teal organizations, because essentially it's how to balance chaos with order. And as a team, when you're working in the creative industry, and particularly with games like you are, balancing chaos is a daily challenge. So the idea of a chaotic role is what I'll focus on today, is the idea that regardless of your hierarchical role, your LinkedIn profile, every one of you, if I look at your profile, Wanda, you've got a very different profile to Nico and Ollie, but you're complementary in your skills, obviously. Now, the chaotic role has got nothing to do with your competencies as a LinkedIn profile. It's an extra role that often when we talk with startups, it's a great way to start thinking of salary rewards, because there's think of them as hierarchical, natural hierarchy of involvement in the collective intelligence. A participant, I'm not going to go through these in detail because there's going to be a separate video on this. This is really just for you three to sort of calibrate your check-in. I'm giving you a bit of time to think here about your chaotic roles, because some of those things you've remembered from years ago and some of them are still like being processed. So you could be a participant, which means you promise to just turn up, be present, tame your ego, be prepared, and respect each other and feed the collective intelligence, just as opposed to feeding my own agenda as an individual expert. That's where the difference is to normal participant. So just a participant role is level 1. That should be everybody in the company. But you can also turn up to any meeting or event as a harvester, which means helping to collect anything interesting that's relevant for the collective output. In your case, in gaming, that's going to be things like to-do lists, planning how you're going to distribute the work, outputs in terms of builds for the game development. And it's not just collecting one person's inputs, it's collecting for the others. So it might be that you do this in Trello or another system of collective harvesting, Miro boards, mural boards, or whatever. The hosting role is the often invisible thing that people confuse with facilitation. So the host is really focused on process, where a facilitator usually interrupts on content. So here, the hosting role that you've been trying, I think this is where we had the most conversations in the past, is somebody steps in to look at process, time, rules, and make sure that we finish on time, that we're not just all talking over each other, particularly when there's creative projects that involve a lot of people. And the last one of those chaotic roles is the steward, which is traditionally what we would call a project manager, but it's actually interesting to separate the role from a project, focus specifically on what the long-term views, the purpose of the organization or the team, and the rules. It's the person who sets the rules. And in your case, there's been a lot of work, even in the early days, at setting value rules, which are rules that link to a value and a behavior at the same time. And that's the job of the steward, who's looking at that, taking extreme ownership of the bigger picture, focusing on process to help things structure, balance the chaos over time. You know this already, but I'm just sharing this for the viewers to be able to sort of navigate when we use steward, that they don't think like my aunt did last weekend, that it's a medieval term that talks about medieval people in setups. It's actually a very contemporary term that is useful to separate from your LinkedIn profile. So now you've had a bit of time to think, and we're going to go into round 1, which is the boast. And as a boast, here are the rules of the check-in. Check-in, just because I'm hosting this with separate rules, just to be able to show you what it means to have a chaotic process. The rule is one person at a time. Here you can talk, I would say, as long as you want, because you might not be that talkative on the boast. We're in Finland. And the idea is that we then don't comment on each other's. Otherwise, it becomes a discussion immediately. So this is just a check-in where one at a time, when you're ready, you can take the stage and share what are you proud of having done with chaotic roles to balance chaos and order. Where are you proud of having used these chaotic roles? Who would like to go first?
I don't mind. I mean, perhaps, this is an obvious one for Olli and Nico, I believe. But anyway, I'm gonna voice it out here because it's the first round, and focus on what's in the past, so what we have been doing. And I have no problem taking credit in bringing the order into our processes, basically in every single one of those roles, depending on the situation. Being the guardian of the order would be something that came to me very naturally from early on, since joining Psyon and working closely with Olli, because in our dynamics, and you probably agree with this, Olli, you are the one who brings in the chaos, and I need to figure out what to do with it. So that's kind of the way how our dynamics have worked between me and Olli. But also with the three of us, the three musketeers, there is a tendency for I would say Nico to jump in on Olli's excitement, and the role of bringing in the order still is kind of usually, if we go by the usual way and don't question these roles at all, it usually becomes my responsibility. And I'm also saying that I probably kind of tend to go that way, so doing it very naturally. Most often it's harvesting and hosting, and perhaps even like how to say, spontaneous hosting. So seeing that, okay, there was no agenda, so let's make one before we go on, so we know how many things we have to deal with and how much time we have, and so on. So this kind of orderly, and yeah, I definitely resonate with what you said about the host being focused on the process. I love the process. So toast to that.
I'll toast to that boast. This is my little glass of water here that I'm toasting you with. The Order Master Wonder. Yes. What I mentioned in the check-in, by the way, because now we're focused mostly on process, is what Psyon is working with. Actually, you are working with educational gaming and science, which I think is interesting to add in at this point, because what we're working on with Green Elephant is also bringing the science into how to run organizations and teams with collective intelligence. So that's why we've been working so well together, is we have the same end goal, which is really looking at what works, not just what feels right. Now, often people, particularly in creative environments and a lot to do in gaming, tend to resist the idea of roles and rules because it feels like, oh, I don't want rules. It stops me being creative. Actually, it actually is the thing that empowers creativity when you have some structure in the chaos. So thank you for bringing that structure in the chaos, Wonder. Who would like to check in with the Boast next?
I can say a few words at this point. So what I have been like really liking in this, and like taking it in, like this whole Viking meetings that we have had, Viking check-ins with that we have had with Wanda and Olli. I'm like, we have brought that and some of those rules to like in daily meetings with the team. So taking the best features in practice to like quick team meetings as well. So for example, everyone knows at the daily meetings that what they need to, like how they need to prepare. Team is always prepared and only says like things that is really needed. But we also have like also this kind of daily uplift in meetings that like breaks the ice as well. But like so that the our team members really comes to meetings prepared, and when the host is like watching the time, they understand totally if the host says that, okay, we need to move on, can you wrap up quickly? They don't like they understand it and wrap it up quickly, and we can move forward because they understand that it's part of the process, and we respect the rules to make the process work. Also, like that everyone like aims for the collective intelligence, and yes, I think my point is definitely like taking these in the like other meetings as well at Psyon Games.
I'll toast to that. I'll boast. Thank you. You see, you used the rule, which I forgot to introduce. Yes. Thank you. See, you just talked about rules. You boasted about rules, and you reminded me as a host that I forgot the rule of "oh," which is actually a really useful non-verbal cue that we've been using together with Psyon for years. The idea is that when you're talking in a Zoom or in an online meeting, you've all had this situation of having somebody talk and then you don't know if it's the next person. There's awkward silence, this kind of thing. So one thing we've been using for years is this idea that when you speak, you say "oh," which means when you finish speaking, you say "oh." It's a Native American habit that's well before the internet, and it basically means thank you for listening. I have spoken, and normally the others all answer in sync, or which shows that they're listening. First of all, it focuses the listening, but it also means thank you for speaking. We acknowledge that the word is now open for somebody else. All that in those two little or. And it's actually quite fun to use. Some people use os. But it creates a fluidity of interaction, even in an online space, plus increases the listening of everybody in the room. So thank you for reminding Nico very coherently of your boast and doing the rule of oh. Who, maybe Ollie, would you like to boast something? I'm sure you got something to boast about, Ollie.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe I first mentioned that, okay, what Wanda said about like her role, that usually bringing the order to the chaos. I think that's kind of like a right description about our kind of like dynamic and interaction. So usually our discussions are very kind of like intense. There's lots of challenge and so on. So and I think that we have kind of like naturally adopted certain kind of roles when we interact and when we discuss. And so we can have this kind of very, how to say, like improv discussions where we just begin the discussions without any kind of like pre-structured roles, and then we are able to kind of like identify that which kind of role suits for each other at that specific moment. But we are also able to kind of shift the roles very fluently because we have been practicing them. And so like Nico described, that we have been able to also bring this dynamic to our to the rest of the team. So not if we have, let's say, 3 to 5 people, we can kind of like it's easy to kind of like say that who's going to be the harvester and collect all the wisdom from the meeting and so on. So yeah, I think that's like that's the kind of like what we have been able to. How we have been able to kind of learn during these years where we have been practicing these roles.
I'll toast to that too, that boast and this. So, in summary, you've been boasting about the order, bringing ordering, even last minute, Wanda, with an agenda that hasn't necessarily been sent before, but at least it's done live. Then there is the rules and the respect of the collective intelligence that Nico said. And then being able to switch roles. Those are 3 really great boasts, by the way. Before we jump to the second round of the Viking check-in, this is where it gets so messy. This is where it gets juicy as well. Because why am I using this Viking check-in is that it's a format that's incredibly powerful to get people working together and thinking in collective intelligence that one day I would love to do heads of state working through this Viking check-in format and doing talking about diplomatic incidents with this format of, okay, what are we proud of? What's working well? That was round 1. Okay, now we've got a bit of positivity in the end. Now we can start tackling what's challenging. There's always things to fix. There's always things that don't quite work out. Now, when we think about chaotic roles, you had a lot of things that were at the beginning when you were in your operations functioning partly and partly frictional. Okay. One thing that you did really well is that when we scanned the last time the data on your chaotic roles, you actually ended up having the most structure in your roles out of all the different touch points. And the thing that you just said in your check-in is that the meetings is where there's still a bit more chaos that's left over. But you already, like most people, when you scan with the roles, they have a huge chaos in the role. You've already got a lot of structure in the roles, which is what you said in the check-in. So praise to you on that. Well done. What I think is interesting is that you had micro habits that you were testing, which were designed for you to think of shifting how you invite and so on. I'm giving you a bit of a heads up here to think about now. Out of all the things that you've learned about chaos, I'm talking also about potential internal conflicts. I'm talking about how it is when you're running a meeting as a host when the process hasn't been decided up front in an invitation agenda, or when you have to make quick decisions about long-term vision and direction changes, Ollie. There's all sorts of chaos that emerges when you are running a startup on a day-to-day basis. Now, today, what is your current challenge as a leader? And if you don't have a challenge, you might just share a bad or worst experience you can use to sort of learn from each other about this topic. Who would like to go first, opening up their current challenge?
I have mine ready, but I don't mean to kind of talk over if someone else wants to start on this round. So how
Go
is
ahead.
it? Okay. So yeah, to carry on the line of thought that I already began in my Boast, this mostly related to like, okay, yeah. The reason I find myself bringing the structure and creating the order in these situations is mostly because I identify what I would call an integrator. Basically, trying to step back and see what's missing from the scene when a communication situation is happening. Are the like people understanding each other? Is the situation lacking something? And what I always try to do is cover up for the lack of like whatever is lacking that is causing friction in the process. I'm trying to lubricate that. And because of our tendencies and the way we are, and what is our like most our comfort zones, that is kind of what I end up doing a lot in the same way in most of the social interactions that we have. And all of this kind of brings up my managerial brain and this kind of orderly and very structured, always thinking and expressing clearly and so on. So I tend to go into that one role, or it's not the only one role when we're talking about chaotic roles. I can do that as a host, I can do that as a participant, I can do that as a steward, but it's always I have this like same point of view to the discussion, which is about bringing in the order and the required structure. And individually, where I would like to go is to become more creative and kind of nurture my own creativity and nurture my like ability to just interact in the moment and not be so very calculative all the time about everything that I say and do. It's important for me as also building my brand as Wanda. To be able to be creative and kind of spontaneous in the moment and not taking it so seriously. And I find these two approaches to situations very, very contradicting. And I often feel that it's my responsibility and my duty to the team to, well, integrate and cover up for what's lacking. So basically bringing in the order. So I don't get much practice in being chaotic and being spontaneous and being funny in these social situations that we have. That's my cat, sorry. But anyway, this is my challenge. So the clear contradiction between where I always end up kind of being versus where I would want to go and the skills that I would like to develop.
Thank you, Wanda. Would you be willing to receive some feedback and discussion on that challenge?
Yes, please. I'm open for all kinds of discussion here because I think it's a wonderful opportunity to learn and perhaps see the forest from the trees.
So in terms of what you said, being creative, spontaneous, less calculative, not taking it too seriously, being able to be in a way the chaos bringer, despite having always that role that you tend to default to, which is the one bringing the order by hosting, for example.
Yes.
Ollie, Nico, do you have any things to share? I have a couple of thoughts to put on the table, but do you have anything to share or feedback or opinions or praise or advice about this that Wanda's shared so far?
I think it's...
Go ahead, Nico.
Yeah, so I have seen that because that's like the role that Valtteri usually have, and it's because most of our team members are really like just want to go and do, and somebody needs to take care of the like steering the car, not only um, pushing the gas. So I understand, Valtteri.
Thanks, Nico. Yeah. Any other thoughts, Ollie?
Yeah, I kind of recognize what Wanda was describing there, and I think Wanda is a person who reflects a lot about where she wants to be in the future, and who she wants to become, and how she wants that her role will kind of develop and so on. And that's a very good thing, because then you keep aligned on kind of your mission and vision, and you see that if your company is going to the same direction. And then when you are managing the daily life, there's always like managing the daily operations, daily life, and then kind of like trying to see the bigger picture where it's going. And this actually reminds a lot about my own challenge. But I can come to that later on. But anyway, so yeah.
Yeah, let's finish on Ollie, and then we can open up another challenge. I think there'll be some other things to add in there. What I think came out from what you said, Wanda, is that I think there's probably an assumption or limiting belief around certain things going on here. One of them is that, and this is probably not only with you, I think this is a very universal thing that happens a lot, is that people often think that the chaos is the creativity. In fact, when you start looking at conflict mediation and creativity together, you'll note that they're actually the same thing. Really, creative tension, when it's not handled well, becomes dysfunctional conflicts. So creativity and conflicts are pretty much the same thing. So you could reframe what you're doing as a company as constantly getting in conflicts to solve creative problems around gaming. And when that happens, the two processes that are the most difficult to host are creative processes and conflicts. Hosting conflict mediation is really hard work. You can't just sloppily walk in and expect things to work out. You have to have somebody who drives the process like the car. So what you're doing is a favor to the group. And there is an assumption that the creativity cannot be tapped into when driving the car. But that's, I think, where switching roles is really important, because the reason why chaotic roles are different to the hierarchical roles that people use in LinkedIn is that specifically a chaotic role can be switched. You can have rotation of hosting, but for that to happen, you need to have a process. If there's no process, you can't rotate. It's the person who has the ability to improvise a process who hosts, in this case, you. So when you want to share the load of process hosting, it means that for some of the meetings, probably the recurring ones, Monday meetings, stand-ups, whatever, or a creative meeting format that you have an alignment on, you must have a couple of meetings that you're constantly doing similarly every week. And those, if there is a sort of standard set of steps with time buckets, process steps that are not to do with content, that you can change the content every week, but it's like what we're doing with the Viking check-in, round 1, round 2, round 3. It doesn't matter what we talk about in those rounds. It's a process that has a time bucket to it. If you have those defined up front, then Wanda, you no longer need to do every single time the improvised hosting of a process. So I think then it becomes a collective intelligence of the team to say, okay, we're having a meeting format X, which is called a weekly team alignment or something. And then you would allow others to join that host, and then you can be the chaos. You can bring in the chaos because you can sit back and be a participant in a process hosted by Nico, Ollie, or somebody else in the team who knows this process. And Anna was pointing out something else in the chat, which is, I wonder what would happen if you, Wanda, would allow that void to exist for a while without filling it and surrendering and surrounding it, surrendering it to the chaos. So I think what could be an interesting thing is to sort of step back and see consciously and even playfully and say, look, I usually am the one who improvises a process. Who's thought of a process today? Emptiness. What are we going to do about it? Smile, sit back, relax, and see. And it might be that then suddenly Nico does, okay, I'm going to pull a process out of my backside and see what's going to happen. Or Ollie is going to go, I remember last week's process. Let's use the same one and try it out. And then it might then allow you to sort of step into a participatory, chaotic role, being creative. That's one comment. The other comment is that you can absolutely be in the hosting order role and still not take yourself seriously and be playful and be creative. It means juggling two hats. The host hat. So as a host, I'm having to interrupt you, but as a creative, I'm really excited about this idea and I would really like to explore it. But as a host, that's why those hats are important, because it allows you to fluidify and not take the role too seriously and step away like you do with the role of Wonder. You can jump roles in a host and a harvester and a steward and a participant quite easily and fluidly when it's done consciously and vocally, that it's not just assumption that because you've done it last time, you do it this time, or because you're the project manager, you do it. That's often what happens in startups is the most senior person defaults to hosting and they even don't have a process, but people expect them. So you can voice that and say, who's hosting today? Okay, I'll do it today, but next week, could somebody else do it? So a couple of thoughts on that.
If I may comment on that,
Please,
definitely
please.
really good pieces of advice to tap on. And where this mostly emerges is not in our recurring meetings, because those are the most process oriented, the daily ones, the weekly meeting. Those are where everybody is already kind of aligned with the rotating roles and all these process steps that we have to the chaotic in the company. So the weeklies and the dailies are fine. This is mostly related to the like ad hoc like quick meetings that happen. And I remember this brings us back to what we talked in the cabin sessions when we were doing some of the scanning, where we talked about micro habits, and one of the micro habits was the green invites. And I do think that this is something that we as a team could brush up on, because we did do that for some time, but then it has kind of we haven't been practicing that actively, I would say. And it was a very good way to kind of create even that like minimal structure to any meeting that happens on a like 1 hour's notice or whatever, but gives you enough time to prepare for, okay, what's going to happen, what we're going to talk about, especially what's the goal, the outcome of the meeting, what do we want out of this, so that it doesn't become just like endless discussions with no direction. So definitely would remind myself and the three of us to keep on using the green invite to outsource the structure to preparations that are done before the meeting, so that we don't have to focus so much on it during the meeting. And this was my first thought, and definitely putting some pressure on the rotating the roles just by sitting back and not taking my role instinctively is definitely something that I would love to do and will definitely try. So thank you for that.
And thank you for mentioning the micro habit. I just put it there. It's quite difficult to read probably the details here, but this was the micro habit partly that you were referring to, is that when the trigger happens, that when you're scheduling even a last minute meeting, summarize the problems to solve together and the roles in the meeting in the invite. So it could be literally, Google Calendar is sent out beyond the topic and time. You just have one sentence that says, we're meeting to fix this problem. You're expected to host.
Mm-hmm.
Deal with it. And then the others is like, okay, I'm gonna do a 3-point check-in. I'm gonna ask this question from everybody to make sure that we tap into the collective intelligence in that 15 minutes, because it does get chaotic, because we always have those chaotic meetings in every company. But then it's like corridor coffee machine conversations. They do end up being chaotic. So it kind of, by the way, I've been talking to startups over the last 6 systematically all been struggling with the same problem, which is that because we're a startup, because we're a small team, because we know each other, because we're not too sort of corporate and hierarchical, there's a lot of spontaneous meetings, but those cost the chaos. And when I look at your data, the thing that had the most need for order was the actual inviting of meetings, particularly the spontaneous last minute ones. So yeah, just a little thought about, you can template it. I was actually preparing a YouTube tutorial for that, of how to template an invite with 3 lines of text. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that, but something that just gets everybody aligned before, like for example, Ollie, if we're talking next week, if we're meeting for breakfast, what's the purpose and who's hosting and why are we, and what are we going to cover are we going to just do a check-in, this kind of thing? For example, that could be a great practice for how to actually get that use of time collectively fluid. Are there any other things about this particular challenge, or should we open up Ollie's one that you had mentioned earlier?
I'm happy with the contributions from the team, so happy to move on.
Yeah, so I can mention that. Yeah, I can mention my challenge on this.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, so like I think that always when you are kind of like running the business, then there are kind of 2 businesses you are dealing with. It's kind of like the now business and then the future business. And especially when the when you're a startup with a kind of like a short or small resources, it means that the now is always kind of like urgent and it's super important and so on. But still, you should be able to lots of time so that you can kind of plan ahead. Let's say like half a year, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, even more. And so whenever you are planning the long term, you should be able to give yourself the time to be like in the role of like a steward, for example. So that you can like participate in the meeting, and then you look it from the kind of like a little bit more holistic perspective. But for example, me with some of the teammates, I naturally take also the like host and harvester role. And at the same time, I try to be the steward. So it's usually like this kind of one-on-one discussion where I write down things and I have the agenda and I know what needs to be completed. And at the same time, I try to put them to, or like tie those kind of like urgent things to the longer vision or something like that. So that's kind of challenging for me, that how to like, how to navigate between the different roles in certain situations.
Thank you, Ollie. Just to re-express that challenge, the shifting between the roles, and the other thing you mentioned implied in there was the accumulation of roles. Like if you stack them, if you're hosting
Yes.
and harvesting and stewardship, that's like obviously cognitive overload,
Yes.
which becomes a flow question about level of challenge. You're gamers, the level of, how flow works, balance challenge with competence and hack your flow. That's another topic of like, okay, reduce the challenge, reduce the number of roles you're trying to stack. I think what your challenge is more about is the second, which is how to switch between those roles, or is the first one more of a challenge?
I think that like how to switch between those roles, but sometimes it feels like that I have to manage all of these roles at the same time. So that let's say that the dynamic between certain team, for example, with many advisors, let's say that with many advisors, I come to the meeting with agenda, and I'm kind of like the host of the meeting, and at the same time I do the harvesting, because the advisor is not like working full time, so I want to collect all the information, his wisdom. But at the same time, I also need to be the steward, because like I have maybe better kind of understanding about the long-term vision, where I'm trying to match his kind of guidance. So then kind of naturally I take all of these. His role is maybe like participant or steward, but I try to be all of those three. So sometimes in those situations, it feels kind of like it's cognitive overload, But it's kind of fine. But
Are you willing to
challenging.
are you willing to receive some opinions, advice, or praise from the
Yeah,
others
sure,
on
of
this
course.
topic? Yeah.
Yeah.
Nico, Wanda, do you have some things to share on this?
I always do. Perhaps a perspective that I could offer is that first of all, I want to kind of remind you that you often, despite the fact that doing all that at the same time must be very consuming, I think you excel at it oftentimes. And there definitely, like if we talk about in team, like team-wide meetings, what makes you a really good leader is that you never kind of get lost in the now and the urgent, so that you would forget to communicate the bigger vision and the purpose of why we are doing this. I think you always kind of that you have that so crystal clear in your mind that you are always able to kind of tie it that to any topic that we're basically talking about. That happens in every weekly meeting. So I'm not very concerned that you would kind of slip on that role. Whether that affects your ability to host or harvest at the same time, if one of those roles have like you have to do those in the weekly meeting at the same time, then perhaps it might be the harvesting or the hosting that might suffer from that a little bit. But I think you always prioritize for what is most important for you to serve from the point of view of the collective. And then other point of view I would like to offer for when you're having these one-on-one meetings with the investors often, so that there's nobody to back you up to do these harvesting or hosting or anything like that. First of all, why not? We could easily invite Nico or me there to back you up, and we could agree the roles in advance so that you wouldn't have to do everything yourself. It's just like, again, an assumption that we are used to operating with, but there's no reason why we couldn't change that. Perhaps individual time use, but especially for the most important investor meetings, I don't think there's like you cannot prioritize those too much. So whenever there's a big one, we should definitely make sure that you're on your lane when working there. And another thing that you could do, if like you cannot have backup from the team in that sense, you could also explain to the investor or whoever you're meeting that what you are doing, and perhaps clarify yourself, like what is the most important thing that you need to be doing here. Is it sharing the long-term vision when you are prioritizing the stewardship, or is it harvesting? So is it a type of meeting where you mostly listen and type in the stuff that they are telling you? And if you kind of inform your partner about this role in advance, they will know why you behave in the meeting the way that you do. And perhaps if you think about the purpose of the meeting in advance, then you could kind of highlight to yourself that, okay, I need to be doing harvesting for this one because whatever reason. Basically kind of clarifying it to yourself and focusing on what's important instead of trying to always do everything at once. Those are my tips on this one. Oh.
Yeah, thank you, Wanda. Very, very good comments.
Definitely agree with
And Nico, would you like to add some more? Yeah.
definitely agreeing with this one. With understand all his challenges with this, and Walter is comment agreeing with that. And yeah, regarding the topic itself, I would have few like small comments, but checking the timetable, I don't think that those were the like most important and valuable ones. So I think we can skip those.
We do have time, by the way. I don't think we have to be too concerned. Because this is a streamed format. We can be quite relaxed about. This is a conversational format rather than an entertainment event. It's for us as a group of people thinking together. So one thing, by the way, Anu was pointing out in the chat here is that what would happen if you asked them, the others, to host a harvest? Obviously, there'll be people who are absolutely not willing to do anything for others than their own harvest. That's a fact. There are people who are relatively self-centered in harvesting. But asking that question allows you to say, well, if you are okay with me being fully focused on what you're saying, can I just put my tape recorder on the table? Two things in the case. One is that you can automate the harvest because you can just record verbatim what is being said, not what you thought was being said, which is often with people who are making high-stake decisions, a huge gap between what is said and what was remembered. Also, it makes people behave differently. They tend to sort of carefully talk, which is not a bad thing when you're negotiating because you can backtrack to what was the nuance. And thirdly, you can automate the harvest because you can just throw it into something like Descript and AI, and you just literally in the evening, you upload all your transcript, and in 2 seconds, you've got a verbatim text transcript that you can turn into a Google Doc and share with them and say, by the way, when you mentioned this halfway through, I put this and I send this as a follow-up to you. So it also allows you, if you don't have the backup of your team, Nico, Wanda, or anybody else, it allows you to fully outsource the harvesting to an AI and focus on stewardship and just juggle between 2 roles, at least not 3. So that's another thing that can happen is voicing the elephant and saying, okay, well, are you able to take notes for us today? You're going to send us some follow-up? You probably don't have time. Let me record it for us. It's sort of like you legitimize the recording because they're too lazy to do it themselves, rather than say, can you do it? And they'll just go, most people, in my experience, in high-stake roles are relatively lazy with harvesting. They think it's a secretary's job, instead of actually thinking that it's for the collective benefit of everybody agreeing on something important. So that could be a way of sidestepping that whole awkward dynamic of who's taking that role. And Anu said advisors might feel more included and part of the team if they even asked up front to be harvesting, and they might actually, you will get some people who love harvesting, who are very note oriented or who feel that their flow there, because if often they're bored, so you up the challenge, you create flow for them. So it can also be an assumption worth checking that they actually might really enjoy the whole process, co-hosting, co-harvesting, flow. So a couple of thoughts there. Anything else Nico to add, because you had some other thoughts? Or
yeah, I think like like when you work as a steward, we all have little bit different kind of perspective for the company. Like Olli knows more about like how is our like investor discussions going, and Valtteri knows like how is the communication going with the partners and clients and everything, and I know what's happening with the team. So we have like different perspective for the like company needs from different areas. So in that case, in every meeting, I think we all need to work as stewards in a like practice.
Yeah. And just to reflect on that, Nico, is that there's 2 scenarios that could happen. One is that you tap into that collective live. So you might just decide that critical meeting, the 3 of you just turn up. And one of you is hosting, one of you is harvesting, and one of you is steward. That's one way. By the way, as a rule, in our team, we always, in critical meetings, have 2 people, one host, one harvester, and the steward is usually one of them. But the other thing that can happen is that you can use the higher authority. It's used a lot in negotiation, the usual negotiation gambit, they call it, where you say, oh, I need to talk to a higher authority, the team or somebody else, the investor, the board, usually an undetermined higher authority that's not so clearly determined. So you can also use the other 2 stewards as a higher authority to give yourself 12 hours of thinking. You might already be doing this, but you can say, look, as a steward, you understand that I need to make some decisions of how we could do this. But just for me to be fully aligned with Nico and the team's possibilities, and with Wanda and the other aspects of let's get back to it tomorrow morning, I'll just quickly align with the other stewards on the team. And suddenly it gives you that possibility for deciding more wisely on something that on the cuff of the moment, you might not be actually making the wisest decision on your own. So either way, being alone or with the others can be beneficial if you play those roles as being like in a game of sports, like front, attack, back, defense, this kind of thing. Use them like in a sports. Does this bring any narrative, Ollie, or do we go on another round of this challenge?
We can go forward, I think.
Thank you. Nico, do you have any challenge that you'd like to share? Is there something on your mind that regarding roles and chaotic? I mean, you're running a team, so you've probably got the most chaos to handle actually in terms of daily operations.
Yeah, and yeah, I think like the challenge has been to like so that team members will understand how does the roles go, and will follow the like agreed process. So keeping that way, and make everyone understand why we do this. I think that's been a like challenge. But when we have been having the meetings for a longer time with these roles, I think it has been like working much better, and they have also understood that like why we do this. And it's like project management. We do this to help the team to like make work more efficient and easy for all of us.
I have a tricky question for you three because this is a stewardship question. How do you reward people taking more than a participatory role? This is a leading question because behind this question is an insight I've had from trying to build salary grids in startups and teal organizations. What happens often is that when you start building a team, the way you reward people by salary is indexed to their level of expertise, the weight they're carrying, their seniority, and obviously the index of payment for their particular role in the industry, which makes it really complex, particularly when you change size, because the rules change as you grow. So usually when you start to get 20, 30 people in a team, you start to think of HR. The HR manager is starting to think obviously of hiring policy and salary and reward grids and growth curves. What I've seen happen is that it's very often easier to build a reward system on these 4 roles, which are very simple, and you can do debriefs on those roles rather than only on, okay, I'm a senior developer doing it, therefore I should be paid X amount, because then it also allows a transparency of, okay, well, this year I have to step down from being steward because I've got some family issues. I need to just be either participant or host. So this is why there's these 1, 2, or 3. Like the metaphor that I use is the agricultural metaphor. It's like if you were farming, these are different levels of in a way, contribution to the collective intelligence. So my guiding and leading question in a way is, are you using chaotic roles to inspire the way you reward and pay people?
I can answer that we are not currently doing that, but I think like the overall, how to say, how much people take responsibility and how much engagement they show can be seen as in those roles. So how active people are when they choose different roles. If you are only participant always, you don't kind of show ownership and engagement. So we don't have we haven't made any kind of like decision to use these roles when we are thinking about the salary framework, but we are in a way still including them. That's kind of my view on this. Valtteri and Nico, or Vanda and Nico, what do you think?
From my perspective, like of course giving excellent feedback and like thanking the team members that they take like more responsibility about like pushing the company forward and helping with the like overall picture, and in practice, and also like in a bigger picture the company. Of course we like give feedback regarding that, but we, as Olli said, we don't have like any like practical or like system created how to like reward with these kind of things. I think I don't know if any startup would have that kind of system. I don't know.
Yeah, just echoing on what you both said. What I think is the most visible thing is that these roles do give tools of engagement to any process, even to those where you're like you're not the expert of that subject, but you can still be a very important servant of the process, simply engaging to the chaotic roles and volunteering for them, asking for them, and taking over. So I would say that over the years, what we have seen the most is that the people who engage in the chaotic roles are the most who kind of end up with the most ownership in the process, and then also on the project level. So in that sense, this might be something that we should be communicating more clearly, because we are now all kind of aligned that this is what we see happening in practice. We haven't been thinking about it or voicing this out this clearly. So excellent leading question, Estelle. But yeah, definitely, it's the ownership is the reward that comes in the long term. And obviously, we do credit people for taking over any role voluntarily in any situation. So always toasting to that. But there's no, as said already a couple of times, there's no inbuilt system of rewards integrated to these roles.
Thank you for that. I mean, obviously it's a leading question because I've been pondering on doing actually a video on this, because I've seen a few different HR setups in TL orgs and other places where essentially some of them have been as bold as saying that, when you have different levels on you have junior, senior, this kind of thing. What does it mean they use this kind of thing? So a junior is participant, a senior is this, a super senior is that. So that's one way of, it doesn't take away the expertise roles that are usually used in any organization. Like if I draw this a second, it's like you have, you can separate the two. The process can be just like roles that you build to progress in your career very fluidly, also go up and down depending on the person's needs. So they have a baby, they suddenly need to step down because they have too much to do at home. So it creates this fluidity in the HR process without having to always it be like a big feedback session and a career move, but it can be something very fluid that is given feedback on. So what I've noticed in some is that the content roles are like, okay, I'm a developer, I'm this role, I'm marketing and so on. But these roles are always going to be there anyway, because that's how you recruit people. This is just an extra flavor that can help you create a fair and transparent salary index table that simplifies the whole thing. I've seen, interesting to check out what Futurice has done with that respect. I've seen a few things that when they were evolving there, if anybody watching from Futurice, I'd be curious to see how they do it now. But for the idea of connecting feedback to, and at the same time creating this upward encouragement more than verbal, sort of not just saying well done, but actually being able to measure and say, actually, practically, you've hosted 5 meetings this month, whereas last month you were participant in 5. And so that's clearly a sign that you should be rewarded for that, because you're helping the collective intelligence in that stuff. So this is just an invitation to think about, because it might fluidify and simplify a lot of your internal structuring when you've got other things to do, like building games and getting investors and runways. If you can simplify things somewhere, it's always a good idea. But anyway, that you got the point. That was just a leading question that's like food for thought. Also for people watching, because I know a lot of startups are having this question at the moment, like how on earth do we structure and reward roles beyond the usual LinkedIn profiles? So now we've got to this round 2. I think the last round could be ripe for us. the toast. Now, why do we finish with a toast? Because it's nice to close with psychological ending on a positive note of gratitude. And the toast, as the name suggests, is something, a person, a tool, a role, a success, or anything you'd like to collectively toast and bring attention to that has helped you handle chaos. Who would like to toast first? And if you don't have any yet, I can toast as well.
I have one. I would definitely love to toast to you, Esther, and to Green Elephant in basically introducing us to these terms and this logic and this whole system of thinking about team leadership and conscious communication, which has been already a part of the company since 2016. So it's been a long journey, and we've been kind of taking more and more of your guidelines into practice over the years. And every time we have done this kind of intervention where we kind of review the way we operate and then look back and think that could think it in terms of value rules or micro habits or many other ways of basically minor adjustments to what is the daily processes, but the way of thinking behind them being so much more structured that it gives us great tools in building the team, and also kind of like as Nico said in his Boast, kind of bringing the team together to respect the process to get the best content. That's basically what this has been for us, and hands down some of the like best experiences in leadership coaching that I've ever had. So toast to that.
Thank you. I'll toast to that. Nicely said. Any other toasts?
I can go. So I would like to toast to our team and our chief of the board. So, there are many people in this company who have showed during the years this kind of like, how to say it, exceptional engagement and commitment, and exceptional engagement and commitment, and it has kept us together, during the difficult times, and so yeah, so it's kind of like vaguely related on this in these roles, or I would say that when people are engaged, you can see that they participate in discussions, they are active, they are willing to take different kind of roles and so on. So you can see it in that way. But generally, the kind of commitment and engagement. So I'm talking about that.
Oh, I'll toast to that. Oh. What about you, Nico?
I think, like, of course, the full Psyon Games team, and like how we work together, and during these years how we have been making great games, finding great partners, and like lots of awards as well. And I think it tells something about our team and or like how the way we work. Like it actually it doesn't even feel like work when you work with the like people that you like really enjoy working with, and working with games and changing the world with games. I think like what else you want. Like I think this is just amazing.
I'll toast to changing the world through educational games. That's a nicely ending way of saying it. to toast something. I'm going to toast to something that happened a few years ago with you three, which I still see as one of the best experiences I've had. Seeing a transfer where, just earlier you said wonder. Sometimes I want to be the one bringing chaos. I remember when you did bring chaos once, and how you were able to, with the humongous courage, tackle that as a team and transform that into something trust building and beautiful. So I'm going to toast to you three musketeers, actually, and it's not because you toasted me, Wanda. It's actually, I had this in mind before, that the I don't know many teams of founders or CEOs in startups who are able to see beyond the dysfunctional conflicts that always occur, put their egos aside, and tackle the thing functionally and build trust from it. That's like beautiful. That's also why I wanted to have you on the stream, is because I look up and respect to you as a team of three and the bigger team that you have working with you. But it's incredible, and I think there's a lot of people out there who would benefit from having that level of ability to step away from their ego. So I'm toasting you three's ability to step away from your egos and your individual preferences and challenges, and be able to turn any difficult situation and conflict into a transformational, functional conflict that builds trust between you and makes you stronger. So I'm toasting that. And because you are an educational startup, I think you deserve to be shown around everywhere. Like I always talk about how you got this special permission from the World Health Organization to be doing a COVID game, how you've been talking to so many different industry partners about not just doing education or gaming, but both together, which is the holy grail for many startups to working with gaming. Is to edutainment is very hard to balance, and you kind of nailed it. So I'm going to add a link to Psyon, so anybody who's interested can go and check out your portfolio and what you're working on. And I'll do a shameless plug to what we're doing. If you want to get your own scan, and if you're particularly in Finland and you're working with startups, or you don't have very high budgets, and we can get ELU funding for you to actually get your complete dashboard and leadership coaching from the Finnish perspective very easily. So just contact us through our usual online channels, and Anna will be able to get through to you. But meanwhile, I think for today, we have closed our Viking check-in. Thank you all for having been diligently ready on time and prepared everything technically, that we even look purple, all of us, despite it's a bit of an accident there. Thank you. And please stay online. I'm going to stop the stream, and then we can debrief this in the same channel. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining in the chat, and looking forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.